What is going on, everybody? SchwayZ here, and in today's video I review the highly anticipated 2024 Ford Mustang Dark Horse. Let's get started. Now, before we get into today's video, I do want to extend a huge thank you to Garff, West Valley Ford, for giving me the opportunity to review this vehicle for you all today. If you guys are in the market for a new or used vehicle, as I'm sure you can tell, they have a large assortment of different inventory. I'm sure they'll be able to work out a deal with you. If you guys are interested in their information, I'm going to put it down in the description below. Let them know that SchwayZ sent you. Okay, so what exactly is the Ford Mustang Dark Horse? Well, first of all, this is the 2024 Ford Mustang. It's brand new redesign for the 2024 model year, and this is the 7th generation of the Mustang. Now, the Dark Horse is actually the performance series. In fact, the first new performance series for Mustang in the last 21 years. The one before this one was the Bullet that came out back in the early 2000s. So this is essentially a replacement for the Mustang Mach 1 of the 6th generation S550. This one is codenamed the S650 for the 2024 model year, and as I'm sure you can see, we'll talk about the styling here, but it is an evolution of the prior generation. It's not a revolution by any means. It's definitely got some style cues that the prior generation had, but it looks a little bit more refined, a little bit more modern and aggressive. Okay, so speaking of design, let's talk about the front end, because this is bespoke or different than all the other Ford Mustangs, because the Dark Horse comes with a few additional accents. So first of all, you'll notice that every single Mustang is going to have these tri-LED headlights. I'm sure you saw that little animation on the daytime running lights as well. Looks really good. They're all going to have these tri-LED daytime running lights with the amber light when you unlock it, but the Dark Horse has some dark accents on the inside. So you'll notice a lot of gray or black coloration on the Dark Horse because, well, it's the Dark Horse. It's meant to be kind of more sporty than all the other versions. And you'll notice that the front fascia is entirely different than all the other Mustangs. You've got this gray coloration all across the front that extends from the driver to the passenger side. You'll also notice that the front end has a black painted grille instead. You also have these large air intakes on the driver and passenger side, along with a little light located up here, and that's for a little bit more air for the engine, which we'll talk about in just a second. Now, moving down further, you'll notice that the front splitter is different than all the other trim levels as well. You've actually got a little bit more of that dual coloration here, and you've got more air inlets located down here for your radiator. And then moving upwards towards the hood, you'll see these creases that extend all across the hood, and then this bulge in the middle. It's not huge, but you can definitely notice it when you're looking at it kind of sideways. And then this leads to this heat extractor located over here. This is on the GTs and the Dark Horse, and it's meant to remove some of the heat from the engine bay, which we'll open up in just a second and show you. As you can see, this Dark Horse does come equipped with this vinyl sticker. The Mustang Dark Horse looks really good, and again, a little bit more of that gray color, which you'll also notice over here on the mirror caps. Ford calls this the tarnished dark color, but it looks really good, and I'm sure on other colors except for black, this will stand out a little bit more, but the black really does show off how beautiful this vehicle is. And then you do have a pony projector lamp over here as well. One thing I want to point out over here on the side is this Dark Horse emblem. Ford says this is the first time that they're using the front face of a horse on any Mustang model, and that's kind of cool that they make this look a little bit different than all the other trim levels. I also want to talk about the wheels. So the Dark Horse trim level gives you 19-inch wheels by 9.5 width over on the front and 19-inch by 10-inch in the back. Now, these are 255/40 Pirelli P0s. Then you've got 6-piston Brembo brakes. These are about 15-inch calipers over here on the front. And then moving towards the back, you've got a little bit of a wider setup. Same Pirelli P0s, of course, but you're looking at a 275/40 in the back, and you've got 4-piston Brembos back here as well. But overall, a really good looking color. I like the design of these wheels. They definitely look pretty cool, especially with that gray matching some of the gray accents you find all across the vehicle. Let's talk about the length of this vehicle. It's actually just about 1 inch longer than the prior generation. So we're talking 189.7 inches long, and the Dark Horse is just slightly longer than the regular GT and EcoBoost version. And that really has to do with the addition of that rear diffuser and a little bit extra up here at the front, but mostly it's about the same size as the prior gen, give or take an inch. As we move towards the back, you might notice this widened rear quarter panel. This is something that they've definitely revised for the 2024 model year for the 7th generation Mustang. They made this a little bit more crisp. I mean, this is like a really sharp line. You can cut a steak on how sharp this line is. Some people say that this is reminiscent of what the Camaro had, and I can definitely see that, but it's an evolution of what they had on the prior gen Mustang, but it looks really good. good, makes it a little bit of a wider vehicle, especially from the back. Speaking of the back, this is probably the largest change, I would say, of the 2024 Mustang, and that is this new design for the rear deck lid. So you have this sharp crease, again, going off of that crisper line that they've provided for the 7th generation, but you have sequential LED taillights here on the Dark Horse version, and typical Mustang, you know, they look really good. I always like the rear end of how Mustangs look, and you got this cool animation as you unlock it. Again, you've got that Dark Horse emblem in the back. It looks very menacing. And then this one, being the Dark Horse, you have this performance spoiler as well with that same type of tarnish dark color, and this spoiler is bespoke to the Dark Horse trim level. Now, moving further down, you'll notice that the Dark Horse comes with a quad exhaust setup and a large rear diffuser, and you also have these active valve performance exhausts with the black exhaust tips, and boy does this thing sound good. Let's take a listen. Overall, it's a really good rear end. I think it definitely is an evolution of the prior generation. That pretty much finishes off the exterior. Now let's get under the hood and talk about what's going on with that powertrain. Okay, so under the hood of the Dark Horse is somewhat of a familiar place. So what you see here is the same 5-liter Coyote V8 that you would find on lots of prior generation Ford Mustang GTs, and it's a really tried and true engine. I mean, this has been used on pickup trucks and sports cars and pretty much everything in between, but it has been revised for the 2024 model year, especially for this Dark Horse trim level. First off, you'll notice that you have these twin intakes over here. So you have dual throttle bodies on the 5.0 Coyote, and they've actually revised the internals. They've added new injectors. This is, by the way, port and direct injection, in case you were wondering. They've added a stronger camshaft. They have forged connecting arms and bearings that they've transferred from the Shelby GT500. So what does all of that mean? Well, that means you get more horsepower than you ever did out of this Coyote V8. So in this configuration with the Dark Horse, you get 500 horsepower and 418 pound-feet of torque, which is really insane for just a 5-liter engine. There's no supercharging, no turbocharging. This is just a naturally aspirated V8, a classic muscle car, and it produces 100 horsepower per liter. It's really amazing. Now, in terms of fuel economy, in case you're wondering, it's not that bad. 14 in the city, 22 on the highway for a combined 17. And this is mated to either a standard 6-speed manual transmission, or you can option for a 10-speed automatic. In the manual transmission, this will do 0 to 60 in just about 4.1 seconds. If you do the automatic, of course, it's going to be a little bit faster. You're looking in the high 3s, somewhere around 3.7 seconds, 0 to 60, which is really insane because the GT500 did 0 to 60 in just about those same figures. So this is arguably just as quick 0 to 60 as the Shelby GT500. Now, as with everything, every year cars get a little bit heavier. The Dark Horse trim level, because it has a few extra standard features and goodies on the inside, this thing weighs just under 4,000 pounds. Okay, now is a good time to pause this video and hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of the cool car reviews coming your way. All right, now back to the video. Okay, so we've talked about some of the things that come on the Dark Horse, like the increased horsepower, the brakes, the tires and wheels, the active performance exhaust, but there's a few more goodies that come with the Dark Horse trim level. First off, you'll notice there is a strut bar that extends all the way from driver to passenger side, and it actually extends into the firewall as well. So that gives you a little bit more structural rigidity. You also get a Torsen limited slip differential in the back with a 3.73 gear ratio. So that allows for a little bit better grip when you're taking it around the track. The Dark Horse also gets you standard Magna Ride suspension. And essentially what that does is the shocks will adjust up to 1,000 times per second depending on what road surfaces you're driving on. So it should make for a little bit more comfortable ride and more composed when you're taking it on some very fast racetracks or just driving it fast down the road. You also get a stiffer suspension overall to make it handle a little bit better on curves. And part of the reason this engine can produce more horsepower than the standard GT is because you have improved cooling underneath the vehicle as well. Everything from the radiator to the oil pan to everything in between. So lots of things that they've added on the Dark Horse, and we'll talk about what that means in terms of pricing in a minute. But first, I want to show you what's going on the inside, because that's probably the biggest change with the Ford Mustang. Now, I do want to show you this key. This is just your standard Ford key. This is actually the exact same one I have on my Bronco. But what's cool is if you choose the automatic transmission, this one's actually the 6-speed manual, so it won't work. But if you choose the automatic, you have a remote rev function where by clicking on the remote start function and then clicking the unlock button and the lock button, this car will rev without you sitting inside the car. So if you want to show off to your friends or just random passerbys how loud and how powerful your car is, you can remotely rev your car from the key fob, which is something I've never before seen on any vehicle. So that's a cool touch. But let's jump on the inside. Now, Ford says that they've updated the materials that are used on the inside for this 7th generation model. And just taking a look and sitting in this car for the first time, you can immediately tell the difference. Now, granted, this is the most expensive Ford Mustang you can currently buy, and so of course it's going to have better materials, but nonetheless, this definitely feels its price point, in my opinion. You've got soft touch materials over here across the top, a little bit of this Alcantara suede, got this fake looking carbon fiber material, you got a black plastic door handle, which is a little bit odd. I wish that was aluminum. It doesn't really feel as sturdy. It might be aluminum, but it doesn't feel like it. You've got your speaker grill over here that kind of molds into this trim piece, a little bit more of that Alcantara, and then I do like that you have blue stitching as kind of a theme on the interior. This is all hard touch plastic down here, but you got a little bit of a compartment for you to put a water bottle or something like that. It's not very large, but very similar to other Mustangs. And then a little bit of gray coloration over here on the door handle. Your window switches are just your standard Ford switches over here. Looks very similar to other Ford Mustang models. Then you got a little bit more of a speaker grill down here. Now, in terms of speakers, you've got a 12-speaker Bang & Olufsen sound system on the Dark Horse, which is double what you have on the base Ford Mustang. So I'm sure it sounds really good on the inside. You've got Mustang Dark Horse written over here on the door seal, which is really nice. And then as you can see, this plaque has a little blue, and so do these seats. These are the optional Recaro seats that you get on the Mustang. They do look really good. You've got a mix of suede here with a little bit of a blue suede, actually. There's a coloration underneath with this black suede over here. You've got a big thigh bolster over here, and then big bolsters over here on the side. They hug you really nice, and they look really good too. This definitely looks more like a sports car than just your standard Ford Mustang seat. Now, if you do choose the Recaro seats, unfortunately, you lose heated and ventilated functionality, and you lose the power seat function that you get on the standard Dark Horse. So it's kind of up to you. If you want these things to hug you a little bit tighter, you're definitely going to want to choose this option, but you do lose some creature comforts when you do that. Now, climbing inside is where you'll notice the biggest difference from the 6th generation, because the 6th generation didn't have this much screen real estate on the inside. You have a 12.4-inch all-digital instrument gauge cluster display and a 13.2-inch touchscreen display over here in the center. It's got Sync 4 system over here, and it's similar to other Ford products, but it's definitely a little bit more advanced than the one I have in my Ford Bronco. So you have your home menu here, and then you can click the settings button over here on the right-hand side. But it's kind of got this dual screen setup that you'll find in some of the other Ford products that you may have sat in. We'll talk about some of the features here in just a second, but let's talk about the steering wheel, because this is brand new for 2024 as well. All Ford Mustangs will come with a flat bottom steering wheel, but this one definitely looks a little bit different because you've got that blue stitching that goes all across the inside, which looks really good. On the left-hand side, you have a lot of your safety features, which are standard. You know, you've got adaptive cruise control, you've got lane departure warning and lane keep assist, where it'll kind of, you know, guide you back into the center. You've also got blind spot monitoring as standard on the Dark Horse as well. And, you know, plenty of safety features for any modern muscle car. Now, in the center, you have this darkened Ford Mustang logo, and on the right-hand side, you've also got a button here to regulate your different steering modes. So you've got normal, comfort, and sport. Here are your controls to regulate this center display over here. Now, it's pretty simple overall. There's not too many menus over here, kind of like your typical center gauge cluster on any car, but there is a cool feature. So over in your center display, if you hit the features button and then you click My Mustang, you'll notice there is a cluster theme over here down at the bottom. Now, currently it says match drive mode. I'm currently in the normal drive mode, and so that's what that looks like, or I could just switch to it and it'll look exactly the same. But if I click on sport, you'll notice it will change into a different gauge cluster display. Looks really cool. Next up is track, which looks dramatically different. Definitely a sporty theme on the inside. You can click calm, where it's just your tachometer and then your speedometer in the middle, but not too much going on. And then there is a cool Fox Body 87 to 93 theme. So this is the Fox Body Mustang, very popular vehicle. And as you can see, you've got green gauges. That's something I haven't seen outside of Need for Speed, but it looks really cool. I imagine in the future they might add additional types of gauges with software updates, but that's pretty cool that they are definitely playful with their themes. And personally, I like the track mode. This one looks the coolest, but there's plenty of options, of course, to choose from. Now, to the left of the steering wheel, you've got your typical Ford headlight controls, not too much going on, but I do want to point out, you'll notice that again, some of that refinement in the material quality. This is a nice soft leather touch material with some blue stitching, and then this entire top part of the dash is all soft touch material. No longer do you have hard touch plastics up here. This is like a rubberized injection molded plastic material, but not that typical 2000s hard plastic that you find in a lot of Fords. I also like that you have this textured material, the same stuff you find near the door handle. And then one thing to point out over here is you'll notice you have this Dark Horse plaque over here that also has your chassis number located on it. So this is, you know, R0156. That's a cool add-on that they kind of make it a little bit more unique of a vehicle. You kind of feel like you're driving into something special, not just kind of a regular Mustang. You've also got this same type of nice material over on the passenger side with this fake leather and that blue stitching. And then there's another look at the passenger door panel. You know, sitting inside this vehicle, this definitely feels about the same size as the prior gen Ford Mustang. I once had an EcoBoost as like a rental car, and it felt very similar to this, although this definitely has much more technology, much nicer use of materials. These seats definitely hug you in a lot more than the rental car fleet, but it's not a larger vehicle by any means, but it's not as tight as the Camaro. That's something that a lot of people are aware of, but I wanted to point that out. Very easy to reach the passenger side door panel, and it definitely feels like you're sitting in a sporty vehicle overall. Now, moving up top, not too much to discuss here, just a rear view mirror, and then you've just got your light controls over here. Feels like a little bit of a cheap switch over here. Doesn't feel very high quality, but you're not really going to touch this very often. And then you do have a sunglass holder here as well, which is nice. And then you do not have a sunroof over here on this particular trim level. Now, moving towards this center dash, I've told you about some of the cool features here, but I want to point out some other ones. So first off, if you hit the features button and you go into your My Mustang button, you'll notice that there's auxiliary gauges here. So you can cycle through a variety of different gauges that show your oil temp, your battery voltage, you've got your transmission temperature, and then just your G-forces over here in the center as well. So it's kind of like your performance pages, if you guys are familiar with Dodge products. You've also got the My Color theme, and this is where you can change the different themes of the interior colors of the vehicle. So as you can see here, I changed it to red, and that tachometer color has changed, and you know, now I'm going to change it to brown. So there's a lot of variation here. You have primary and secondary colors, and then you've got your ambient lighting over here as well, and I believe that's just in the footwell down at the bottom. There's nothing too crazy in terms of ambient lighting, but it's cool that you can customize some of the interior colors just using that function. You've also got a custom mode, and this is where you can go through and regulate your suspension, your adaptive dampers. You can regulate your steering, whether you're in sport, normal, or comfort. Of course, your traction control, and it's cool that when you push these buttons, it automatically moves the vehicle around to show you what it's working on. So right now I'm in the normal exhaust mode, and that will change also depending on what drive mode you're in. And then this is where you can regulate through your different drive modes as well. So you've got normal, you've got sport, you've got track, you've got a drag strip mode, and you've got a slippery mode. And you can change your different profiles by setting up different people. So depending on who's driving the car, they can automatically set that. And then you've got your track apps over here, which is kind of another version of the performance pages where you can look at your acceleration timer, your brake performance. This does have a line lock feature as well. So it will lock up the front tires so that you can essentially burn out the rear ones or warm them up for when you're taking this onto the drag strip. And then I do want to talk about the drift brake. So in this menu, if you turn it on, this is when you take it to a track and do some autocross racing. But what that is related to this handbrake. So you may be wondering, this looks like your conventional manual handbrake where you pull on it and it will automatically, you know, raise the lever and lock up your handbrake. Well, this is a little bit different. This is actually an electronic parking brake that's meant to look like a manual handbrake. So as I pull this up, there's actually nothing going on. There's no, you know, physical connection to the handbrake. What I actually have to do is pull on it, and as you can see, push the brake pedal down to release it. So currently my handbrake is on, and then if I push this thing down, then it automatically turns it off. So let me show you what that looks like. I'm gonna pull on it, it turns it on, I can even hear it, and then when I push it down, it turns it off. So it definitely takes a little bit getting used to, but it's kind of cool they've integrated a more visceral experience when you're pulling on the handbrake, because typical electronic parking brakes are just kind of a little dinky switch that you have to pull on. So when you take this to the racetrack, you can actually pull on it kind of hard, and there are some videos of reviewers doing it out there on the racetrack, and it feels like you're kind of pulling a manual handbrake. So pretty cool stuff there from Ford in the 7th generation Mustang. I should also mention you have wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto as standard on the Dark Horse. Now, of course, there are more features to talk about on this 13.2-inch screen, but those are just some of the highlights I wanted to point out. Now, moving down, no longer do you have a circular air vent system, and as you may notice, you no longer have the dual cowl setup that you have in the prior Mustangs as well. There was kind of a throwback to the prior gen Mustangs. I mean, the interior of this Mustang looks totally different than all the prior generation Mustangs, for better or for worse. But you've got the horizontal air vents over here with a little bit more of that same textured material. And then moving down here, this is kind of a touch sensitive panel. So of course you have the start stop button, that's a physical button, but then you got these set of buttons over here for your traction control, your hazards, you got a favorites button, and then you've got your window defroster. But then you'll notice there's this Mustang button over here, and by pushing this button, this will automatically pull up your My Mustang mode. So it's nice that you don't have to actually hunt through this infotainment screen, but you can just click on this button and it quickly pulls up your main settings over here. One thing you may have noticed as I'm showing this down here is, yes, you have a physical volume knob, which feels pretty good, but where do you control your climate control settings? Well, some of you, or most of you, I will say, are probably going to hate this. These are all touch sensitive control. So you do have dual zone climate control on the Dark Horse, but unfortunately you have to use the touchscreen to activate it. So your temperature settings, your heated steering wheel, your fan speed as well. Now the nice thing is these settings are always located at the bottom of the screen no matter what menu you're in, so you can always easily access them. But it is a little unfortunate that as you're driving, you're going to have to click on these buttons to have to regulate the driver or passenger side air temperature. But that is kind of the common trend in the auto industry. It was going to happen sooner or later. Now moving further down, you do have a wireless charging pad over here on the Dark Horse, and it can easily fit one of the largest phones on the market, which is the Galaxy S22 Ultra. You've also got 2 USB ports over there. Of course, you've got the 6-speed manual transmission over here, and they say this is a 3D printed titanium shift ball, which looks really cool. It's got a cool touch to it, and the shifter here is very notchy. I mean, feels very good, very sporty, definitely like what you would expect from a performance vehicle. Moving further back, you got 2 cup holders, and then a somewhat soft arm console over here, perfectly fine for resting your elbow on long road trips. And then there's a button located over here on the passenger side to open it up, and you've got a little bit of space over here. Now on the passenger side, you've got a little glove compartment, probably about the same size as the prior gen. Now jumping into the back, this definitely isn't going to be the best place for adults, similar to all other Mustangs. Ford says you have about 29 inches of legroom back here, but as you can see, you know, behind the passenger seat, there really isn't that much space, but they do have a little bit of bolstering over there, and I do like that they didn't skimp on some of the stitching on the back, along with some of that Alcantara material as well. So it's definitely a good looking back seat, just not the most comfortable. And you've got hard touch material over here, so if you're resting your elbow, it's not going to be very comfortable in the second row, but that's not why you buy a Mustang. Now climbing into the trunk, very similar to other Mustangs, you have 13.5 cubic feet of space back here. Now it's not a massive amount of space, bigger than what you'd find in the Camaro, but smaller than what you'd find in the Challenger. You do have the additional Bang & Olufsen subwoofer back here, but overall it's not a bad amount of space. Then you do have a fix-a-flat kit located underneath. You could probably fit some sort of spare tire down there, but it doesn't come on the Dark Horse. Now in terms of warranty, you've got your standard 3-year 36,000 mile bumper-to-bumper limited warranty and a 5-year 60,000 mile powertrain warranty. Now pricing for the Dark Horse, it's not cheap, but as you saw, you do get quite a few features as standard. The heated steering wheel, the wireless charging, the drift brake, those are all standard features, along with all the safety features I mentioned. Now starting price for the Dark Horse is $59,270. So let me show you exactly how much this one costs. So this one has the Premier trim with the color accent. I think that's the blue color I was talking about. And then you've got the Recaro seats and your gas guzzler tax. So all in all, this particular vehicle I'm reviewing today is at $66,510. Well, there you have it, folks. That is the 2024 Ford Mustang Dark Dark Horse. What are your thoughts on this vehicle? I mean, this is essentially the last American muscle car to survive. The Camaro is axed, the Dodge Challenger is going off into the sunset as of the end of 2023, and this is the only V8 muscle car that's likely going to be left as of the end of this year. I personally love the fact that they're still making big, naturally aspirated V8s, but it's not the cheapest one. Would you take this over the Ford Mustang GT, which is about $15,000 cheaper than the vehicle behind me? Or would you spend the extra cash and get the Dark Horse, because this is likely the last naturally aspirated Ford Mustang you're gonna be able to buy? Well, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for all of the weekly car videos. Also check me out on all the social media at SchwayZ_. Until next time, everybody, I hope you stay SchwayZ, stay healthy, have a wonderful day.